Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Questin here with a discussion about Bretonnia in Total War Warhammer 3 Immortal Empires. Out of the Order Tide races, according to the polling data that I've done, the polls that I've done, Bretonnia is number 2 on the priority list for players to rework out of the Order Tide races. So it is one of the higher priorities in general for players in Warhammer 3 to get a rework. Do they need it? Well, kind of yes and no. There are certainly improvements that Bretonnia does need, but they do have a lot of strength, in particular on the campaign map, though they do also have limitations. Now, limitations aren't necessarily a bad thing, unless they're freaking annoying. And certainly the limitations that Bretonnia does have, or the issues that Bretonnia has, are more of the annoying type as opposed to like your race is complete garbage type. Looking at you, Norska. And the community agrees with that perspective on Norska at the very least. So let's talk about the strengths. Bretonnia has a good amount of income from sacking and looting settlements. The way they do it, it's not that their income from sacking settlements is significantly greater than other races by default, no. But when they fight a battle for a settlement, they can either raise, sack, or occupy a settlement. Sacking it will not necessarily give you, like, this is a tier 1 settlement, so, like, he had recently captured it, that's why I only get so much money. But when you sack settlements, you get the quote-unquote negative trait. It's considered, like, the butcher trait, or the destroyer trait. This can go up to 50% income. It does take a while to build up, but you can get that on every single lord. And 50% income from sacking settlements is very significant. You do miss out on having an option to loot and occupy, but you can sack numerous settlements and gain a good amount of money. You lose some control, but that's not really a problem for Bretonnia. Why is that not a problem for Bretonnia? Well, let me just say like here. Bretonnia has a commandment that generates 10 control. You'll never face rebellions as Bretonnia. And besides, the most amount of public order issues don't come from sacking or even -4. It comes from occupying and looting settlements. You have to work hard to get a rebellion right now in the game, considering how it is. And Bretonnia is certainly not going to get it. Like, extremely rarely, maybe in provinces with that had a lot of corruption and it didn't go away, potentially, right? And even then, probably not so much. So you can have multiple lords with butcher, and you probably are not going to get rebellion. So it's a positive. Oh, but what about the chivalry? Well, there's positive traits that give you chivalry as well, so I wouldn't worry too much about that. Like, your lords can have positive traits for chivalry, your heroes can have positive traits for chivalry, and you can get a lot of heroes as Bretonnia as well. So you get more money from sacking and looting settlements. Bretonnia basically feels like the greenskins for the Order Tide in more ways than one. Or maybe the Skaven would probably be more fitting, because you burn settlements to the ground and then rebuild them. The way you rebuild them is your structures aren't necessarily cheaper, but you have the highest amount of growth of any race in the game. And I'm not exaggerating this by any point. Your minor settlements go up to tier 3, 60 growth. 60. And they give you control as well from tier 2. That is ridiculously powerful. Furthermore, your major settlements go up to 100. That is greater than Nurgle. Bretonnia is insane. And yeah, you have a growth building. And it's not just that. You have a growth building. You have a growth commandment. This is absurd. In fact, you have a building in Bretonnian settlements that gives you growth in adjacent provinces. Madness. Like, Bretonnia is ridiculous. So you can play an entire Bretonnian campaign in the exact same way Greenskins play their campaign. Burn everything to the ground, rebuild it from scratch, because you'll have both the money and the growth to support it. You don't have necessarily the best construction times, but it is fine. On top of that, they recruit units very, very quickly. The reason they do so is because while they don't get the same recruitment slots, and this is why I talk about the Greenskins for the Order Tide, you can get quite a few recruitment slots. Like over here I have 4. I can get a commandment that increases local recruitment capacity by 2. And then this building increases it by 2 as well, if I get it to a higher level. Now, those buildings, the water wheel, can cause some issues because you need other buildings. You're having to build two buildings, so you end up with limited build slots, but that's not a problem when you can build when you get to tier 5 as fast as possible, and you'll have the money for it, so it doesn't quite matter. And there's also other buildings that also improve your local recruitment capacity. There's not just one building, there's multiple buildings. Certainly some of them are exclusive to one another, but the smithy, yeah, that does it. You get buildings that increase armor to all units, to all armies. That is freaking absurd. You get a construction cost benefit if you get to tier 4. Granted, and this stacks. If only the Empire Armory had this benefit, jeez. So in the long term, Bretonnia has a lot of great things going for them. But as I've stated numerous times, the early game is the meat of a campaign. And there are certainly issues with Bretonnia. Now, what's the quote-unquote limitation? Oh, by the way, just to add on this, you don't have supply lines. Think on that. Like, one of the biggest income increases comes from supply lines. You don't have that. You have a unit cap, after which your economy starts going down. But beyond the early game, it ceases to be an issue, because every settlement increases that capacity. But on top of that, you also get the research over here, water pumps that you should get as the highest priority, that give you an extra peasant for each of your regions. Like, basically, the Bretonian campaigns can be divided into phases. The phase where you don't have this, and the phase where you do have this. And once you have this, it is freaking trivial to always be above the peasant capacity. I don't believe they have students. No, they don't have students. So your research rate is slow, and a lot of the things you do research are not really great, to be quite honest with you. But you can get some construction costs and time, quite crucially, as Bretonnia. There's a lot of good things over here with respect to them. Hell, I might want to play a longer campaign as Bretonnia, maybe the old world. Okay, so that's great, right? Lots of benefits. What are the issues? Well, one of the issues people bring up again and again is the chivalry bar at the top of it. The benefits are certainly great, but I'll be honest, by the time you get to the highest level, it's irrelevant. It's like, oh, you start with the questing bar, and you may call the Green Knight limitless times. So this feels like a meaningless benefit, really, in a lot of ways. The low recruit, like, it does give you benefits in long term, so there's a reason why Bretonnia was a critical part of the Order Tide, because they would build us up. The AI would build us up. They would get vows, they would get experience. Fighting Bretonnia in the endgame in Warhammer 2 was like, oh, you just destroyed one army of high-end units with high recruit rank. We're gonna get 2 more. You kill one, 10 more will take their place. That's how Bretonnia feels like it, with respect to it. Now, the bigger problems, however, aren't on the campaign side of things, though there is one final issue. Vows. Bretonnia relies on cavalry because their infantry isn't great. And it is limited. So you might think, oh, just get a limitless number of cavalry, right? You can certainly afford it. Well, not. You might earn a lot of money, but it's balanced around the idea that you are supposed to unlock vows for the lords and heroes. You can't get Immortal normally for a skill. You have to get it through a freaking vow. That is genuinely frustrating, because it's not like a straightforward path. The most annoying vow, I believe I have a lord over here that has it. No, maybe not that one. Maybe a hero. Let me just check. Henry Massive. But there is a vow that the easiest one to do is to win a siege battle in desert or jungle climate. Assuming it doesn't bug out. By the way, it bugged out in this campaign. And it's like Immortal for heroes and lords is from that. Now, for what it is worth, you do get hero capacity for paladins and damsels who give you replenishment. So you get training, and you get replenishment, and magic, and good magic at that, I might add. Like, you get heavens, you get beasts, and you get life. I mean, life especially is great, but beasts is not too bad. High magic would be nice, to be sure, undeniably so, but you can get a lot of mages. Though be careful about this, because you can remove a negative trait with it, so you really don't want to remove the sacking one. But still, you get a lot of hero capacity. You have high growth, and you can get them tier 3 settlements. So late game Bretonnia, like this is what I mean by Bretonnia. There's the early game, like 20, 40 turns in, and then there's the end game, where you're just obliterating everything in your path. It's not a good difficulty curve. It's not a good campaign curve. That's one of the things I dislike about Bretonnia. That's one of the things I imagine a lot of people dislike about Bretonnia. Because having a campaign that only gets good after a certain point, and when you get good, you steamroll everything, is not necessarily a great experience. It's an issue the Tomb Kings have as well. But in terms of the Lorem roster, infantry is important. Infantry and range. Cavalry is great, but sieges are a problem. You do have options with sieges. You get tier 2 trebuchets. Like, believe it or not, I would have said, and I still say it, Bretonnia is actually a good artillery race. I know, freaking shocking, but trebuchets sell like a truck. They smash down walls quickly. Ignore that missile strength. They do hit pretty damn hard. I'm not joking on that. They will do a lot of damage and has a 50% damage multiplier against buildings. Then you have Blessed Field trebuchets, which don't do, and that don't do friendly fire. It's not necessarily reflected here, but they don't do friendly fire. Again, it's not strictly reflected here. Point is, these Blessed Field trebuchets, like the rocks themselves, will do damage, but to friendly units, but they won't do AoE. That's a critical point in that respect to understand about it. And you can get them far easier than thunder barges or anything like that. They're peasant units, so keep that in mind. You have great cavalry, and you don't just have good land-based cavalry, no, you have flying cav, which gives you a great deal of flexibility in battle. You have really good melee cav, Grail Guardians in particular, at tier 5. So you do have some very significant benefits when you're playing a Bretonnian campaign. And you have cav that can do quite well in a siege, because crucially, with few entities but high stats, huge damage, armor piercing, and all that, these guys can win against most infantry units. But of course, the problem is, again, like that early game situation. Your infantry roster is one of the most terrible in the game. And you might say it doesn't matter, but it does. It matters because of the sieges, settlement battles, many situations. Like field battles, you are king. City battle, settlement, any siege is a freaking annoyance. Now, it's not so bad if you do what I do, out-resolve mods, cheese it, but it is frustrating having that severe limitation. And I really think, like, either peasants need a buff, or we need more benefits that we can get early on for them with the armory. Like maybe give peasants like a 10 armor bonus or various things. Because in the end game, you do get leadership benefits, you get armor benefits, so they actually end up being good. But it's that early game problem that I do have with them. I mean, you can talk about, research tree issues, right? Various problems that we can talk about there and how much they suffer with that. But eventually you can make it work in a campaign. Yes. It just takes a freaking long time to do it. Foot squires are decent, but they're tier 4, and they're worse than many tier 3 units, at least inherently. It gets better later on, but that's the thing. It just starts crap, gets better later on. That's the issue. So it's vows, it's infantry, and research tree, really. And also the Green Knight. That is something a lot of people have mentioned. Like, people, like, the Green Knight was pretty awesome when he was first introduced, but now he's, like, meaningless because he doesn't have a skill line, he's not that great combat. He's supposed to be this awesome Grail Knight, and it's like, he's not a freaking Grail Knight. Like, a basic Grail Knight unit will do better than him in battle, and he's supposed to be the Grail Knight of legend. So I think, like, having a customizable Green Knight would be awesome. Those are the kind of things that Bretonnia needs changed. And also, like, the vows, because, like, Rapunz has an easy time with vows. Albrecht has, quote-unquote, easy time, even though he's stuck in the piss hole that is Lustria. But Lewin and the Fey Enchantress do struggle hard with that. It's kind of hilarious thinking about like Lewin is considered the best campaign of Bretonnia. Sometimes I do wonder what people vote on. Like, people obviously recognize these issues, and then they vote Lewin, who exemplifies these issues the most. I mean, he's really good in battle. You want to confederate him, but his campaign is really the worst of the Bretonnians from my point of view. But not yours, apparently. But yeah, these are the kind of issues for Bretonnia. I think when you have a race, they're not bad early on. That's the thing. They're annoying early on. They're really, really annoying. Limited. And when you have that kind of design philosophy, that is not a great situation. So I would say, in general, for races, we need to have races that are good to play. Like, they get stronger as you play them, but they're fun to play from the start. Like, the Empire is really fun to play from the start. The Dwarves are really fun to play from the start. Skaven are pretty fun to play from the start. That's why those are top tier races. Dark Elves, High Elves, you name it. I mean, Dark Elves have long-term issues, but early game, they're pretty good. So those are the kind of problems. When I say early game, like, I think High Elves are pretty good for, like, the first 15 turns, and you really feel the pain until, like, turn 60 from that point. And, yeah, you never move past the Spearman Archer meta, which is a bit of a shame. You do at least move on from that with Bretonnia. You will get Questing Knights, you will get Grail Knights, you will get Pegasus Knights. So, I remember when Punts was added in Warhammer 2 and how much fun I had with this campaign. It still can be a lot of fun. The campaign mechanics are there, they just need adapted. And you know what? It's kind of hilarious.
I cannot right now.
A lot of these issues are fixed by very simple mods, like the Vow mod, a rework, a couple of units to infantry, and you end up with a much better race to actually enjoy on the campaign side of things. So we'll see what Creative Assembly does. But I make that point because Bretonnia is a free race. I don't think they'll ever get a DLC. You know, I kind of look back at Warhammer 1, because the current situation we have with Bretonnia is actually in large part because of what happened with Warhammer 1. To explain that, initially, Creative Assembly's plans were not to have Warriors of Chaos in the game, or to have them as an event but not a playable race. I think they would have been better had they stuck with that. Maybe make them playable for multiplayer, rosters and all that, and maybe make a DLC later down the line. But the pre-order DLC was supposed to be Bretonnia, and then people, this is why sometimes listening to community outcry and reacting to that is not necessarily the best thing, because CA screwed up. They should have known better. I mean, the developer should have known better, right? People crying out that there was not a playable chaos, yeah, you screwed it up there, big time CA, but your solution was not great. We waited years to have good playable chaos. Because, Warriors Chaos in Warhammer 1, yeah, I would not want to play that experience ever again. I've tried it so many times, it was misery. Pure misery in that campaign. Makes me wonder how things would have been had Bretonnia been the pre-order race. Maybe we would have gotten an Ogre situation or a Norska situation by now. So I guess we should be thankful it's not that bad. I don't know. Make of all of this what you will. Costin signing out.